It's Friday. It's so Friday. It's
It's so Friday.
117 degrees record heat in California Friday.
I,
I'm
and
Jill.
I'm
That's
Deb,
and
and
this is the Friday Grief Chat.
it is. And yeah, welcome to different worlds of grief. That's all I got to say. I know it's hot by you, and that really sort of brings you down that way. This is my cat's tail. Um, my emotional
Yeah,
support cat.
there you go. Weather,
and
the weather and pressure, the barometric pressure
the
really
heat
does
can
change
really
people. Yeah.
it has, and that makes you feel just it makes you feel heavy, emotionally heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody, I mean, we get that too here in the summertime, and the humidity can be 80%, and then we have a heat index, and heat index adds another 10 on there. And I don't know if we talked about this last week when it was really hot, since this particular part of Illinois is completely there's cornfields on every corner. Cornfields or soybean. Corn sweats. Corn, each corn stalk produces 4 cups of moisture. That's what they figured out. And so it's like tons of Olympic size swimming pools filled of moisture. So heat index is crazy around here.
I can't even imagine. I lived through Florida for 10 years in the summer. You know, you walk out and your skin just like, why did I take a shower?
Yeah,
I'm wet again, right?
that's what it is here. But it's from the corn and the soybeans, so it's really odd. Um, Jill, I wanted to talk about. I don't know about you, but one of the vice presidential candidates made a statement yesterday. I'm not going to say which one. People can pick. They probably know. And said, you know, school violence is here to stay. We need to change. And, we're the only country that has this problem, the
Mm-hmm.
only first world country. And I feel sort of hopeless that it's ever going to change in my lifetime. I turned to my husband last night. I said, I don't know if I'll be around for any changes.
I am hoping, and we've all been working. I mean, thoughts and prayers. Yes, people who've just lost someone do want thoughts and prayers, but lots of those families want changes too.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's just been an overwhelming full week of violence and loss. I was in Northern California for my nephew's wedding, and the night before the wedding, the hostages were murdered. And 2 days before that, there was horrific bombing in the Palestinian areas and hundreds of deaths. He knew one of the hostages. He was distraught. They had to address that loss with everybody at the wedding before it started,
Mm-hmm.
um, and talk about there's shattered glass and there's joy, and they happen together. And then when the school year officially started, we started school 3 weeks ago, but when the school year sort of officially starts after Labor Day, one of my first thoughts was, I wonder when. Not if, not how do we prevent it this time,
That's right.
when. And it was
When?
2 days. And there was so much said about the shooter, who it turns out comes from a very disturbed family situation and pure chaos. and then someone handed him a weapon of mass destruction. And like, how are we ever going to change that if 14-year-olds
If
have
the
guns?
parents buy them for their kids.
Right. And I'm not, you live in an area where there's hunting. I live in an area where there's hunting. I'm not a hunter. I understand the need for hunting weapons. I don't understand hunting children and teachers and administrators in a school. I understand this young man had a lot going on, none of it good. His aunt has been pretty vocal. But there's so many reasons that these shootings happen, and what's common to all of them is someone has a high capacity rifle who can shoot a lot of people in a short amount of time.
I know they're not
And
hunting
they
rifles.
follow each other. He was using the name, I'm not going to repeat it, of another shooter
Mm-hmm.
as an identity online. That how do we sort it all out, and how do we stop it, and how do we stop saying mental health therapists can identify this ahead of time?
When they
Because
cannot.
we don't have crystal balls. Honest to God, I wish we did, but we don't. And we can't report anyone unless they give us very specific information.
Right.
Otherwise, we get prosecuted.
That's right. For breaking confidentiality.
So every time one of these happens, every therapist in the area flips through their records to make sure that wasn't someone they ever saw,
Uh-huh.
because they're going to get skewered and you don't know. And you can't, in an hour, a week, know what's happening with the family.
Mm-hmm. You know, it,
And then the grief. Like,
and they
how do
don't.
you help kids who were texting their parents and saying, I'm sorry I wasn't a good enough kid. I love you, mom.
I saw that. Like,
How do you even do that? No child in Germany or England or France or Italy or Spain or Norway or Sweden or Japan has had to write those kinds of text messages. Nobody in Canada,
mm-mm.
nobody in Mexico, nobody. Just our kids.
And and to our listening audience, neither Jill nor I have concrete answers.
Mm-mm.
Uh, you know, the right to bear arms, but if you don't have healthy people teaching children what the respect that guns need, and and did you grow up with guns in the house? I did.
Mm-hmm.
We had my dad liked to display his guns. The pistol was put further away and locked, but my dad would clean his hunting rifles. He would do this, and I watched him, and he said, he taught gun safety. At 12, he took me to a shooting range,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I would know. And actually, another friend of mine, her brother took her and myself to a hunting range. This is when I was in my early 60s, late 50s. And yes, I shot an AR-15. They have them as like fancy pistols, right? So they have them, but if you don't have the emotional sense
The wherewithal.
to not use them, but you can use them for display. You want to do it as a sport, go ahead. But if you don't teach children, if you don't, if you,
Yeah.
I
Our
know,
guns, our guns are locked up. I have a
right?
rifle that belonged to my grandfather. It's a beautiful piece of art. I
Mhm.
don't display it
Right,
because I have small grandchildren and they are impulsive. Those guns will stay put away in a place not to be mentioned until they are all quite adult, and I know they are all quite stable enough to even look at them.
right.
There's a difference, and I listened to those kids yesterday and the day before when they were on that football field, and they were already saying, "I don't wanna come back to school anymore.
Right.
I shouldn't have to go to school and be in fear. We talked about this, but now that it's happened, I don't wanna come back here." We're taking away school from our kids because of their grief, because of their trauma, and we need to give those families and every family that's faced a mass shooting, because every time one of these happens, all the other ones from before
Absolutely.
come racing forward, and we need to support those folks too because they're remembering their trauma.
And anybody that has ever had uh, a murder in their family,
Right, like you have.
they are hit by this too.
Right.
And maybe as time goes on, that horrible sinking, sick feeling in their stomach might get a less and less and less. It still happens.
Mhm.
When I hear about murders in families, I still get a little sick remembering about my cousin's name being blasted all over Chicago TV. It's horrible.
It
It
was like
feels,
that in Berkeley this weekend because of it was the youngest hostage who was
yes,
so connected to Berkeley and to Chicago, both of our places that are
right.
tied to my nephews, and everybody knew them. How do you with so much loss in so many places, how do we do this, Deb? I had to turn off my rescue sites because there were too many last calls for too many dogs, and
Right.
I couldn't tolerate looking at them anymore this week, and I'm the one who's out there running around picking them up.
You
I just
know,
couldn't do it anymore.
you bring up a good point. The point is not that ostriches really buried their head in the sand,
Nope.
not that you would really do that for long, but sometimes you need to shut off, and it doesn't mean you don't care.
You gotta contain it.
Your capacity for feeling and thinking
Mhm.
is running over. So you just it's a slow drain sometime. When it's a high news cycle, it can be a slow drain for the rest of us who care and are overwhelmed by the amount of sad news,
My
right?
spoons were all out this week. I used up all my spoons probably over the weekend, and I and then this, and I'm it's downtime now. I've got a full day, and I have enough capacity for all of my clients and to hold
Right.
all the space and do the work. Hear me clearly. I
Hmm.
don't have anything left after that. After that, it's gonna be weekend.
The other part, when George Floyd died, and there were a lot of protests. And we just had something similar here in Springfield with someone that was shot by police that had mental health issues and whatever.
Mhm.
I I do not like to protest. It feels too angry to me. I'll sign petitions. I will do whatever. But what little thing can someone do to help? maybe not immediately, but down the road. I mean, it, I don't follow the Trump campaign. I
Mhm.
follow this the Democratic campaign. And so that's where I speak from. And when Barack Obama said, you don't have to give $20, you don't have to give 10. Can you give $5? And maybe you can't. It's just the same. What one thing can you do that would make you feel like you did something? Uh,
Even
Another,
if you can say something positive to someone and hold space for them if they're having a difficult right this minute,
mm-hmm,
that's going to make a change,
mm-hmm,
right? Yes, we all need to do something. Call your senator, call your congressman. If the thing for you right now is gun safety, call and have some kind of service done in honor of someone who has died unnecessarily. If that helps you, plant a tree.
what what did I know President Biden addressed this,
Hmm.
and I'm do you know of any groups? I don't right now that you can sign a petition or gun safety. I mean, think
Yeah,
about.
there are some. If you do a quick Google search
Mhm.
for support new gun safety laws, you will find the groups. There
Yeah,
are a lot of them. There are parent groups. There's even a group that unfortunately welcomes new members to the club of families who are survivors of mass shootings. And
mhm.
they have care kits they send out. And so there's that too.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. One of the local schools, um, a child died, I think, in a car wreck, and over the weekend, and they had counselors and stuff available. I I offered to one of them, and when she said, no, no, our school has blah 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 blah. Well, if you need something, which means it's my responsibility to check up on them in a
Right.
week or so.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Drop off some coloring pages that kids can use that teachers don't have to pay for,
right,
that
right.
provide a sense of hope and togetherness. Whatever little bit of kindness we can share with each other in times that are hard,
Mm-hmm.
whatever way we can share it without causing greater grief or telling people their grief doesn't have the right to be spoken or that it's causing harm by speaking it. We
Right.
don't want that either,
You
right?
know, I think part of the tragedy of grief. I mean, I'm not look at the gun laws and stuff, all this prevention, but I don't think at a young age children are introduced to death
No.
unless you know people who grew up on farms and had to they knew that chicken will be chicken
Dinner.
soup,
Mhm.
will be dinner, such and such calf will be that's
Mhm.
going to be dinner. I say this because city folk, their first introduction to death is usually, it may be a pet, but it's probably a person.
Mhm.
And then people don't talk about death and life together. And, you know, they don't talk about, I mean, they say, like you go on a nature walk and the trees die and compost for other trees, right? That's what they say. The leaves fall and there's all these things, and then there's, you know, that's that feeds the soil, that feeds other things. But I don't remember any instructor or guide saying, let's talk about death for a moment. I mean, what a
Mhm.
perfect life cycle that is. And the more you're attached to whatever, I mean, look at that. Remember 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe it was a year ago, when the tree went through the roof of our church, and there was this beautiful. I mean, it's probably easily 3 feet across. the The trunk was 3 feet across, old oak tree, and I was sort of disoriented that that tree was gone.
Mhm.
And we don't talk about that. I mean, all the trees, the dead trees behind us, even some alive ones behind our house, they're gone. It's like it's weird.
You know, we had some cypress trees that died on our street that were very tall and truly very dangerous
Uh-huh.
because Italian cypress grow to be extraordinarily tall. And I live on a hillside, which does catch fire. And finally, the city made the folks take them down. And everyone on the street was relieved, and everyone on the street mourned the loss of those trees.
Right.
Because
Right.
even though they were dead, they housed birds. Even though they were dead, they were part of the fabric of the neighborhood. And that was a loss for all of us.
Yeah. So, we
And we
don't.
talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're glad they're gone and you're sad.
right.
People don't talk about loss. I mean,
And
this
that's
is.
the thing. If we don't talk about it, then we will have losses, and our littles will have losses that they don't know what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
There was a child who died in a local school district not too far from here this last week. It was a natural death. It
Mm-hmm.
was not expected.
Mm-hmm.
They called in the crisis counselors. Most of those kids had never talked about death, dying, grief, loss. And they had to talk about it in school because it hadn't been part of the fabric of home. And the parents hadn't talked about it at home because they were protecting them. And yet it left them with no language
Mm-hmm.
and no ability to wrap their little hearts and minds around what had happened to their little buddy. And that's where we need to talk about it ahead of time
Mm-hmm.
with our littles and amongst each other and with our seniors who can share their wisdom from how they used to do grief and loss and how they do it so
Mm-hmm.
that we can pass down that generational knowledge and the coping that it
Mm-hmm.
took to deal with that.
Do you think, and you and I are just talking here, do you do you think we need to do that with guns in the household? I mean, this, I don't know that you remember, but when there was anti-smoking and you needed to stop smoking, how many kids, like I didn't smoke, but my daughter's father did, and she'd take his cigarettes.
My neighbors, uh, the dad smoked just rarely, but he had a pack of cigarettes around, never in the house. And
Mm-hmm.
after one of those moments, the neighbor child my age, we were the twins for our age group, went
Mm-hmm.
home and wrapped up cigarettes in a piece of paper and threw them in the trash.
Yeah. And the parents would get pissed because back then they were probably $20. Now they're like 70. But it didn't stop my daughter. She smoked cigarettes probably at age 14. She knew where she can
Mhm.
get them. And then she stopped when she was 30. She no longer smoked cigarettes. And I I wonder if we need to start talking about gun safety in in the schools.
Well,
You have
the doctors
section.
are now required in California to ask parents if there are guns in the home with their children.
Wow. And if there
Mhm.
are they locked up?
That's
Now the
exactly right.
parents can lie,
Mhm.
and they do. I mean, the thing that makes me the saddest about this whole thing is that father went out and purchased the guns for his son.
Right.
And and
And that was in some bizarre way somehow how he was going to help his son with bullying. And
yeah,
let me just say, folks, when your child's being bullied, you get them help. You don't teach them to use a weapon, and not even their fists, because that doesn't resolve the underlying issue. We need all the kids to have coping skills so nobody gets picked on.
you know, for better or for worse, I don't know how you taught your daughters, but I said to my daughter, look at if someone is bothering you, tell them no.
Hmm.
If they still bother you, tell the teacher. And if even after that and the teacher has done something, you get to pop them. You get to hit them back, and I will stand up for you. Now, is that right or wrong? And so one day I came to the school and my daughter was chewing on a rag. And I go, and she was 5. I said, what's going on here? She said, I was bad. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, she named the little boy. He wouldn't leave me alone. And mommy, I did what you said. I told him to stop. I walked away. He kept bothering me. I told the teacher. The teacher didn't, teacher said something, and the little boy kept doing it. So I bit him. So she gave me a rag. And in front of my daughter, I went up to the teacher and I said, no, don't ever do that again. If my daughter says this and she says this, that's your responsibility. She had every right to defend herself. But you don't get to use guns. You really shouldn't even like use your fists. They teach you in martial arts that needs to be the very last thing. You have the skills. You can't be just going ahead and using them. So
That's
maybe,
what we taught our daughters was we put them in martial arts.
uh-huh.
And because my kids were impulsive, we didn't give them permission to pop anyone because I was
Mhm.
afraid of their
Yeah.
level of intensity.
Yes.
Um, but it was tell an adult, tell the teacher, find another adult,
Mm.
raise your voice loudly. You have every right to scream.
Yeah.
And that worked. But it's a process.
It,
And
it,
that child in Georgia, someone he never had that opportunity. That is a loss for him. And he's caused a loss for his community. And I'm not saying that I am forgiving him for what he did, but it's understandable that he was not stable.
the
He didn't
parent,
have a chance.
the the parents gave got arrested.
The father did.
The father did
The
because
mom's already in custody, apparently.
uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that child did not come from a place of safety and security. And
So,
that's what we need. Children should have stable homes. And
but
if
they
there's a
don't.
child in your world who doesn't have that, and you can provide some shoring up around it,
Yes.
that's what we do. How
Right.
many of us have had extra kids at our table, extra kids tucked in bed at night? And that is because we don't raise kids in a vacuum. We raise them in a community. And children need the community, and children who are grieving and families who are grieving, they need their community now.
They need their community.
If you know anyone who was a survivor of murder or gun violence or mass killings, please make sure you're checking in on them.
Mhm.
Do you have anyone who is related to anyone who has been killed elsewhere in the world? Check
Mhm.
in on them. No value judgments about which losses matter more,
Right.
because every loss counts.
Yes.
That's all there is to it. Every loss counts.
Every loss counts. And education, like I said, we need education. You'll
And
sign permission slips to talk about guns and
Steve
gun
is now
safety.
doing, our friend Steve, who's with us, he's now doing a grief cafe at his temple.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they're
Yeah.
talking about grief and loss now.
Yes.
Every bit, every little drop
Every
makes
little
a
bit
difference.
helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's been a heavy week.
it has. And your weather increases it so. So,
It's too hot to get in the pool, Deb, to go to something completely not grief related. It's
yeah.
too hot to get in the damn pool.
Yeah.
It is 92 degrees in our pool.
Wow.
You can't
You
cool
can
off.
almost boil. Now is the time. Oh, when it was that hot here,
Hmm.
just for a little humor, there was someone was making a joke about here's the recipe to cook lasagna in your mailbox. Well, it was an obvious joke. Well, obvious to some of us. People got mad. You need to talk to public health. The meat won't be good enough. How do you know? Where did you get the? I mean, like all of this. So, um, I can look for that because you're about ready to cook lasagna in your mailboxes.
Actually, this is the time of year where I take a cookie sheet and put it in the car and put the pre-made cookie dough
Yeah.
on it and let it sit for 3 hours. And generally, it bakes it pretty well.
Oh, Jill, you
So
got
I'm
to
going to
do it.
go get some on my next break, and I'm going to. I did that at the office last year when the weather was not
Uh huh.
quite this bad, and people were like,
Yes.
"You are not seriously doing that."
Yes. I want pictures.
I'm Jill. I went downstairs, I brought that cookie pan up, and we had semi-cooked cookies because you really have to have some fun when it comes to weather like this.
You do. You
Mhm.
do.
And in
That's
the meantime, if you have weather like this, put some water out for your bees and your birds
yeah.
because they're thirsty and they're hot. And if you can put a frozen water bottle out for the squirrels to lay on, so much the better. They're hot too.
Yeah. For bees, you get a little pie dish, you throw in marbles
So they
or
don't
little
drown.
colored things so they can be attracted to it. And then you fill it up just with a little water.
I have bird baths, and we've put stones in it, the rocks that my dad collected over the years.
Uh
So they
huh.
look pretty, but it gives them an escape ramp. And then we put a
Yeah.
couple branches across it,
Yep.
and we put a couple pieces of fresh fruit in it to attract them to the scent because
Yes.
it's just too hot. But yesterday it was so hot by noon, the bees had all gone to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh,
All right, everybody. We will see you back next week. In a couple weeks, we will have an amazing guest. And then we will have a few more coming that we're working on. And we're also going to start a series on movies. I'm not sure exactly when, because we do what we get called to do every week. And
yeah.
today we were called for gun violence. So
Yes.
please take care of yourselves. Please be kind to yourselves. Please turn off the news if you need to.
Do.
Um, and Sharon and Steve, it's nice to see you this morning. Everyone else who watches us on and listens to us on podcast, thank you for being here. Please like us on all the podcast platforms and on Humor, Grace, and Grief on Facebook.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.